There's a critter in southwestern West Virginia that gives the Mothman a run for its money. It's called Sheepsquatch, or it's also known as White Thing. It's a white, fleecy-haired cryptid described as being about the size of a bear, covered in white, wool-like fur. It has a long head, comparable to a dog, but with long, saber-like teeth, and a set of horns akin to those found on a goat or a ram. Its arms end in paw-like hands, like those of a raccoon, but much larger. Its tail is long and hairless, similar to a possum. It's reputed to smell like sulfur, which has been attributed, through folklore, to the beast being born within the TNT area of Madison County, similar to one of the Mothman theories. However, odds on, this is not true, and instead is probably a musk scent gland, similar to those found in species of weasels and skunks. It prowls in isolated wooded areas. It moves with lightning speed, sometimes on 2 legs rather than 4. At times, it seems to have too many legs. Its chilling screams sound like a woman being murdered. Whatever it is, it's bloodthirsty and attacks without provocation. Some of these white mystery beings are also called white devils due to their red eyes and long, sharp claws, and are able to walk and run upright. That's creepy. Some of these beasts have a connection to cemeteries and thus are death omen creatures. I like the name Sheepsquatch better than White Thing. It sounds more like a cryptid. White Thing is just too generic. So that's what I'm going to call him, Sheepsquatch. The sightings go way back to Cherokee lore. To the Cherokee, the sudden appearance of a white wolf heralds a sudden, supernatural, premature death. Over time, the white wolf developed into the Sheepsquatch in Appalachian lore. The Sheepsquatch is large and powerful in build, a beautiful creature, despite hair that is somewhat matted and messy, so it's got bedhead. The Sheepsquatch shows up in roads, follows people to their house, and sits at a distance from residences, as though at the ready for someone. The Sheepsquatch does linger, not for a friend or a lost owner, but for someone's death. It's always seen by the one who is about to die, and even sometimes by other folks who are close to the person. The cryptid is completely invisible to everyone else. Once the Sheepsquatch appears, the person who spotted it is marked for their demise and dies horribly within a few days. While sightings of this beast have been reported several times in West Virginia's Mason, Putnam, and Kanawha counties, and in some parts of eastern Kentucky and western Virginia, the bulk of the reports seem to hail from Boone County, West Virginia, where there seems to have been a run of Sheepsquatch encounters over the past few decades, most notably in the 1990s. Sheepsquatch was first seen in July 1973. It was in the TNT area of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the hotbed of the Mothman sightings during the 1966-67 outbreak. This creature, however, looks nothing at all like the Mothman. The witness said he was riding in his car with family members. The observer described the creature as mostly white, no wings, with real thick, shaggy hair. No face was seen, but the head was about 3 feet wide. That's a big fucking head. The creature appeared suddenly alongside the car and floated through the air like it was flying. Holy flying sheepsquatch, Batman! It followed them for a few minutes as they were driving at about 65 miles an hour before disappearing into the dark wilderness. In early 1994, a group of women were driving along a treacherous icy road in the TNT area of West Virginia. They were slowly inching along in order to keep from sliding off the road. According to the eyewitnesses, they were then surprised by a large creature which jumped out of the woods in front of their vehicle. They described the creature as being around 7 or 8 feet tall, covered in shaggy white hair, a pointed snout, ram-like horns, and human-looking legs. The mysterious beast froze for a moment when the headlights hit it, then dashed off into the dark woods. Later on in 1994, Edward Rollins, a former Navy veteran who was, ironically, looking for proof of Point Pleasant's infamous winged oddity, the Mothman, claimed to stumble across an astonishing creature while creeping through the woods near a creek. Here is an excerpt from Rollins' account. My new hobby took me into the woods and hollers around the TNT area and to the homes of what witnesses who were alive and willing to talk about what they'd seen. While I found a great many points of interest in my investigation, I was not prepared for what I encountered along the creek bank north of Bethel Church Road. I was walking the creek bank trying to run down some tips provided to me by an acquaintance. As I walked the creek, I heard something large break through the brush ahead of me, and I froze. Logic told me that it was, at worst, a large dog, or even a stray cow, as there is very little in the way of predators in Mason County. Still, I've been a hunter since my teenage years, and I knew well that the West Virginia Division of Natural Resources had been actively repopulating absent native species. It was wholly possible that I was about to become face to face with something which might consider me lunch. What I saw emerge from the brush was a large, brownish white creature. Its fur looked dirty and matted, as if the animal did very little in the line of self-grooming. I can't be sure if I was looking at a dirty white animal or a brownish animal with a white undercoat. It was late in the fall, so it makes sense that it might be putting on a winter coat. The creature moved on all fours as it breached the brush line and knelt to drink from the creek. Its front limbs, the only limbs I saw clearly, ended in what were markedly paw-like hands. Its head was long and pointed, like a canine's, and it had a largish horns, not antlers, but single-point horns. I shrunk back into the brush and watched, afraid to stay and afraid to run. It drank for a few minutes, then crossed the creek and continued on across toward the Sand Hill Road. When I was sure it was gone, I turned around and ran as fast as I could back toward the pond where I'd parked. One of the many things that struck Rollins as odd regarding this strange mammal is the fact that it was surrounded by a sulfurous stench that was almost overwhelming. Rollins was against attributing it to some kind of demonic or paranormal manifestation. He instead speculated that this was due to the fact that the industrial pollution that had been dumped in the TNT area for decades has left the area uninhabitable for most wildlife. So maybe it's some kind of mutant. The one thing that sticks out in my mind about this encounter most clearly is the way it smelled. It smelled like sulfur. Now, don't think I'm screaming fire and brimstone here. I ain't. One of the biggest problems with the TNT area is the pollution from the manufacturing activities that went on there. The worst of this is the red water runoff generated by the production of gunpowder. The area was a Navy ammunition plant at one time and made gunpowder. Red water, the cause to this date of the brownish red foam seen in many of the runoff ponds, has a sulfur content that should concern anyone exposed to it. It makes sense that anything living in this area would absorb some measure of that scent if they are drinking from these water sources. Within the same year, 2 children observed the creature while playing in their backyard in Boone County. What they reported looked like a large white bear, except in this case, it stood up on its hind legs, making it well over 6 feet tall. They said it did so in a manner similar to bears trying to survey its surroundings. There can be no doubt that this harrowing brush with the unknown cryptid was terrifying to the youngsters. The kids, frightened by the creature, screamed in horror. Surprisingly, startled by the children, the beast hurried away through the forest, smashing medium-sized limbs off of trees along the way. So it's scared to death of kids? The creature was next seen a year later. A couple was cruising through the area known as Lover's Lane, looking for a parking spot. Cue the porno music. During their search, they got the scare of a lifetime when they spied a large white beast hunkering down in the ditch alongside the roadway. The astonished driver slowed to a stop in order to get a better look at this unusual critter. He and his partner described it as a hulking, ashen animal about the size of a bear. As most folks might do in such a situation, they stopped their car to get a better look at it. As they sat there looking at it, they noticed it seemed to be eating or drinking something. Probably a good idea just to leave it alone. They got out of the car to get a better look. They described the cryptid very similar to earlier descriptions, except they added the creature had 4 eyes. So it had glasses? It's possible that these witnesses mistook the dark horns on its head for an extra pair of eyes. What? How could you? Never mind. In complete contrast to the last sighting, where the Sheepsquatch fled the scene, the creature vaulted out of the ditch and barreled towards them. Oh shit. They both screamed in terror and jumped back into the car. They started to panic as the monster started to ravage their vehicle. It swiped ferociously at the side of the car, rocking the car viciously with every swipe. Metal scratching noises reverberated throughout. Extremely freaked out by the attack, the couple quickly sped off. When the couple arrived home, they noted deep scratches in the paint where the fiend had clawed their car. I'd love to hear that conversation with the insurance company. In 1999, there was another alarming encounter. A pair of campers set up shop in the forest, not far from their rural Boone County home. no doubt hoping to get the benefits of relaxing in the woods without being too far from the comforts of home. I've done that, backyard camping. As the sun set and darkness began to creep through the trees, the outdoorsmen lit up a campfire and sat around the crackling pyre, enjoying good conversation, a warm evening breeze, and, in all likelihood, a beer or two. But the peace and quiet that permeated their remote encampment would not remain for long. As night drew on, the men began to hear what they described as a sort of animalistic snorting and scuffling sounds emanating from the trees that surrounded the campsite. The men were anxious, but confident that whatever it was lurking in the foliage wouldn't dare to show itself near the campfire. They were wrong. Without warning, a huge, white, four-legged monstrosity thundered into the campsite, charging at the men. The campers, with no concern whatsoever for their gear, leapt to their feet and began sprinting through the dark, bramble-ridden forest, praying that they would make it to the safety of their house before the beast caught up with them. That's when they knew they fucked up. As luck would have it, as soon as the terrified men broke through the tree line, the creature stopped its pursuit and emitted what the campers described as a terrible scream. Then it returned to its shadowy abode. While it is virtually impossible to ascertain whether or not this creature may be carnivorous, this account and the previous one would seem to indicate that it is, at the very least, intensely territorial. Well, let's see. Sharp fangs, very big, very muscular. I would err on the caution and say it does eat meat. After a sleepless night, during which the panic-stricken men surely kept an eye out for the creature's return, the campers dialed up their courage and decided to go out and reclaim their supplies and camping gear, which they so hastily abandoned the night before. I'd suggest go armed. On their way back to the campsite, the men noticed the enormous amount of damage that the monster had done, later stating that the earth had been torn to shreds, like someone had tilled it up for gardening. Another interesting run-in with this enigmatic monster purportedly transpired during June of 2011. This event occurred in Fairy Stone State Park, which is located in Patrick County, Virginia. The park is named after the unique fairy stones, dark nesosilicate minerals with white streaks called storolite, which are found throughout the region. The locale is also renowned for numerous perplexing events, but few can be more mystifying than the incident that was reported by a woman who identified herself only as Tina. In her own words, "I hope that you can give me an idea of what I saw a few weeks ago while hiking with a friend in Fairy Stone State Park in Virginia. We had been on one of the trails for about an hour when we stopped for a brief rest and drink. This was my first visit to the park, and I was pleased that the area we were in was secluded. After a few minutes of rest, we continued to walk along the trail when my friend suddenly stopped and pointed towards the right at a large group of rocks. Something was moving around, but it was about 50 yards away, so we didn't get a good look at it. We could see that it was light in color and was quite bulky. We stood frozen, wanting to know what this creature was, though I was getting more frightened by the second. As we started to walk, The creature moved onto a rock where we got a good look at it. It looked like a medium-sized bear, but the fur was very light in color, almost a yellowish gray. The head was also strange. There was a snout like that of a bear, but the dark, round eyes were set lower on the head. It was looking in our direction, and we had no intention on sticking around to see what it was going to do. We got back to the car and immediately left for home. Yep, they noped the fuck out of there. The most recent report of the Sheepsquatch occurred in 2015 when a group of 6 unnamed campers saw it while camping out in Folks Run, Virginia. One of the campers reportedly first saw the creature crouching menacingly atop a hill at around midnight, after which he raced back to warn the others. It was then that whatever it was stood to its full height of 8 or 9 feet, with a shoulder width of 4 to 5 feet. That's fucking huge. It started bolting down the hill towards their camp. Luckily, a river stood between the campers and the creature. After trying in vain to find a way around it, it simply waded right into the rushing water, sloshing towards them. By this time, all of the campers had gathered to watch the strange creature coming savagely through the river towards them. You mean they're just going to sit there and watch it come to them? Get the hell out of there. When it emerged, they could see that it looked like a huge white bipedal dog, dripping water from its soaked fur. Then, a loud, gut-based screech was heard about 2 miles from where they were. The Sheepsquatch looked up in shock, just high enough so that the moonlight was in its face. The campers looked on in fear as it let out a pathetic whimper. Then, in a rush, ran in the opposite direction of the noise. The call had apparently frightened the creature. What the fuck? One could only wonder what could have provoked such a fearful response from the massive beast. The campers quickly packed and left, then reported it to the locals, fearing that if the police were informed, they'd be ridiculed. Oh, I'm sure the police would find some plausible explanation for it. The identity of the campers is unknown as of March 2016. Whether you believe in the Sheepsquatch or not, one thing is for sure. There's something very unusual in the Appalachian Mountains. It's got an aggressive side and is very territorial. On the flip side, and maybe even more terrifying, is that there's something else out there that the Sheepsquatch is fearful of.